Let's march into the 1940s, when fashion goes to war. World War II, 1939 to 1945. Know those dates. Educated people know those dates. Those dates would change our world. Those dates are important. The world of the 1940s. Well, the world of the 40s was the war, either fighting it or recovering from it. World War II began in 1939 when Hitler invaded Poland. America joined the war in 1941, and the war ended, victorious for us, thank goodness, in 1945. For most of the war, the Allies, that's us, the US, Britain, the Soviet Union, France, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Brazil, Denmark, it goes on and on. The Allies were losing against our enemy, the Axis. Italy, which changed sides halfway through the war and became an ally. Japan, and of course Germany. And yet we were actually losing for most of the war, even though there were so many nations fighting only two. Every single man, woman, and child was actively involved in the war. And our beloved fashion fought it too, and was victorious throughout. Before we begin, we have to stress just how enormous World War II truly was. It is arguably the biggest, most catastrophic event to have happened to modern man. An estimated 70 million people would lose their lives as a direct result of World War II. If you or I were alive then, we would all be doing our bit for the war effort. This is so important when we get around to talking about fashion. The young men amongst you would be in active service. You young ladies would be volunteering, engaged in war work, or you would have enlisted in the Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines. Your education put on hold for the duration. That's a phrase you hear a lot in connection with World War II. For the duration of the war. That's the phrase people use because they didn't know it was going to end in 1945, did they? And for us older professors, it was made law here in the United States that anyone under 47 years of age had to do some sort of service for the war effort. And yet everyone from 8 to 80 did their bit. When America joined the war, when Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt, FDR, made a speech to the nation. We are now in this war. We are all in it, all the way. Every single man, woman, and child is a partner in the most tremendous undertaking of our American history. We must share together the bad news and the good news, the defeats and the victories, the changing fortunes of war. This speech was prophetic because, oh my goodness, every man, woman, and child was involved in this war, and it would impact fashion so enormously. You have to get your heads around it. World War II wasn't like any war that's been fought in your lifetime or any war that's been fought in mine. Wars we think, oh well, they take place in foreign territory, and unless we have a family who are actively involved in the military, it doesn't really affect us. No, World War II was different. It was all around you. Do you recognize where this is? This is Grand Central Station during World War II. Look at that incredible mural there. Oh my goodness, buy defense bonds and stamps now, that we may defend the land we love, that these may face a future unafraid. Oh my goodness, it was everywhere. Nearly every young man that you know would have volunteered and enlisted in the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, or the Army, and so might have you. So many young women your age enlisted in the services. You could be a pilot if you wanted to, a volunteer nurse. You could stay at home and be a volunteer Coast Guard, or work at the USO, helping to entertain the troops as they deployed. Even I, old Prof H, I'm over 47, so I would volunteer. I like to crochet, maybe I would knit for victory. Yes, knit for victory. Our boys need socks. Look at these children knitting for victory, these two little boys, knitting socks or gloves or scarves for the soldiers. It was a time when supplies were greatly needed. Communities would get together and have rubber drives so they could recycle old tires, give them to the army. Paper drives. Look at these Boy Scouts. They're having a drive for old metal, copper pots and steel kettles, things like that people don't want anymore. All of this can be resurfaced and repurposed for the war effort. I love this picture of this little boy here, obviously delighted that he's found a couple of tires to contribute to the war effort. And look at Grandpa knitting for victory. All in it, all the way. You see, we had to win this war, because if we didn't, then this would be our flag today. That's sobering, isn't it? And this might be Times Square. The 1940s body ideal. There she is, strong, with broad shoulders, high breasts, a taut waistline, molded hips, and curvaceous legs. She needed to have a strong body because these were terrifying times. And this tall, strong, wide-shouldered body was perfect for utility clothing, for uniform, and for war workwear. This is your Rosie the Riveter. This kind of body, who did this ideal 1940s body belong to? This belongs to Esther Williams. Who is she? She was a swimming movie star. She was a former Olympic champion who became a glamorous movie star, and in all of her movies she does a lot of spectacular swimming. So this ideal of this strong, taut body would work perfectly because these glamour girls might find themselves in uniform. Yet there was a second body ideal in the 1940s. This is the first time we've seen this, isn't it? This body ideal. Small, cute, and curvy. This is one of the most famous photographs of the 1940s. It's of a musical movie star called Betty Grable, and she was a pin-up. Like this pin-up. This was the cute, sexy girl that the boys were all fighting for. She was the reason to keep the flag waving. Let's look at the 1940s beauty ideal. There is our friend again. It starts with a penciled, arched brow, a very neutral eyeshadow, and then eyeliner and eyelashes, but only on the top lid. A nice, healthy, all-American glow, and big red lips. When we put a 40s hairstyle on this face, let's give her a flower too, and then compare her to our original girl, just to remind ourselves of the power of makeup, and then see, this was the ideal. This is Betty Grable again. But this look was ubiquitous. Everybody had this look. It was all American. The story of 40s fashion is interesting. It's fascinating. There were three main groups of fashion, of clothing. Utility clothing. What is utility clothing? Because of rationing and war shortages, there were very strict rules about clothing. What you could wear, how much fabric you could use, how deep pockets could be, how many buttons you could have. So utility clothing was meant to be stylish and boost morale, but adhere to all of the rules. Next, uniform. So many women enlisted or volunteered. And the third group, war work clothing. Overalls, headscarves, dungarees. This is for the women working in the factories who had taken the jobs that men did, and the men were now off fighting. So these were the main three divisions of clothing. However, and ironically, the war years produced some of fashion's trendiest and or most beautiful moments of the 20th century. Trendy, I'll say so. Look at the shoes. Take a look at that. What a fabulous outfit. And for beautiful, I don't think you can beat this. The dominant fashion idea. There it is. Wow. Whimsical, dramatic, or silly hats. Large padded shoulders. Women wanted to feel strong. They had the weight of the world on their shoulders. They needed big padded shoulders to carry it. A fitted waist. Hemlines rise to the knee or just above or just below. Again, this is utility. You couldn't have those 1930s long slinky skirts. No, you needed to save fabric. Everything had to help the war effort. And clumpy platform-heeled shoes. 40s fashion was all about wanting to feel strong and in control in a period of such fear and uncertainty. Yet fitted waistlines and tapered skirts kept things looking feminine. Clothing rations naturally slimmed the silhouette, and elaborate hair and statement hats balanced out the broad shoulders. And here are some examples, so you can really get a feel for what 1940s clothing looked like. And here it is, replayed on today's runway. Strong silhouettes were made sexy with sweetheart necklines, slinky fabric, and ruching. Like this, look, she has those broad shoulders, but look at the ruching and look how slinky it is. It's become very sexy. And what about this for sexy? Or this, sweetheart neckline, incredibly feminine. This dress that we looked at earlier, slinky, ruched. Sweetheart neckline with ruched shoulders. Again, beautifully ruched, so feminine. Here again, and here is a detail, a close-up, so you can see how this ruching worked. So 1940s. And peplums helped balance out those massive shoulders. Some examples of how the peplum structurally worked to balance the body. And we still use peplums today. The 1940s palette. Red, white, and blue with green and yellow. It was strong. It was patriotic. It was bold. And bold prints replaced difficult to acquire trim. Trim traditionally came from Europe. Europe was at war. France was occupied. Poland was invaded. Britain was blitzed. It was very difficult to get hold of trim. And of course, Asia was being overtaken by Japan and was at war. So bold prints took the place of trim to add interest and excitement to utility clothing. Like this, and this, and this. Very strong, bold prints used to add detail and excitement. Patriotism becomes a fashion trend. That's a no-brainer. Fashion is not an island, it's a response. So the red, white and blue and the stars and stripes became a fashion trend in the war years. Look at those fabulous 1940s shoes. Red, white and blue with the stars. And that's a very patriotic swimsuit, isn't it? And this is a brooch. Couldn't get more patriotic than that. Or wait, you can. Victory. This is another pin. Victory. V. Victory. That was the key word. Everything was victory in the war. We had to keep drumming that into our heads. If we said it often enough, maybe we'd win. And we did. So. Rationing really impacted fashion. I know you already know all about rationing. Food was limited. Clothing was limited. Everything was limited. Gasoline was limited. Why? Because everything had to go to the war. Food had to go to the soldiers. Fuel had to go to tanks. And fabric had to go to uniforms, for tents, for parachutes. Everybody was issued with a ration book, and you couldn't get more stuff. Once you'd had your ration, you'd had your ration. So people were encouraged to make do and mend. Make do with the clothing that you have and mend it if it's torn. But also really creative ways to update your wardrobe, grand ways to eke outdated or worn clothes. New clothes from old. One of the things that women did, they would take a man's suit, husbands, boyfriends, brothers, dads. They didn't need their suits. They were in uniform. They were off fighting, and they would remake them into quite chic lady suits. This is a 1940s wartime suit that was once a man's suit that's become a woman's suit. So many rules, how much hem you were allowed to have, literally. And what everybody wanted the most were nylon stockings. Nylon stockings had been invented. You couldn't get silk. Silk was needed for parachutes. But nylon was needed for an awful lot of things as well. Not only uniforms, nylon was used in a number of wartime products. So women were crazy for nylon stockings. And when they couldn't get them, they would paint their legs. There was a product, several products, look, leg silk, where you would actually paint your legs to look like you were wearing stockings. And then you would get a friend to draw a line down your leg to look like a seam. Fashion doesn't stop, does it? This is a line in New York. Look, hosiery and lingerie. Word got out that this store had gotten a supply of nylon stockings, and look at all these women lining up to get hold of a pair. And I guess she did and couldn't wait to put them on. Hair wasn't rationed though, which explains why hair got so ridiculously elaborate in the 1940s. This hairdo is the quintessential 40s hairdo. Do you know what it's called? Victory rolls. I told you victory was the buzzword. Victory rolls were everywhere. I love this picture. It's a mugshot. And look, not only does she have her hair in victory rolls, but she's also adhering to the makeup aesthetic that we discussed earlier. I wonder what she was arrested for. But not just victory rolls, all kinds of elaborate hairdos. Think about it, you couldn't, because of rationing, you couldn't buy a dress to go dancing with your sweetheart on a Saturday night at the USO before he gets sent off to fight, but you could do a fabulous hairdo. And here are just some photo booth pictures. And look at how incredible everybody's hair is. And here is some recent fashion adaptations of 1940s Victory Roll hairdos. War work. Women enlisted in the services. They became volunteer nurses. And of course, here's Rosie the Riveter. We can do it. So many women went into the factories to build the planes, to build the tanks, to do the work that men had done, but they were off fighting. But there were real-life Rosie the Riveters. You all know what a riveter is. Do you know what a rivet is? They're those little screws that hold sheet metal together. And here is a real-life Rosie the Riveter. And here's another. And you'll notice they're all wearing headscarves because when you work in a factory, you have to dress safely. Look at this, the Eureka News Bulletin. War fashions the wrong way. Hair loose, open collar, necklace, arms exposed, rings. No, that's wrong. The right way. Hair up, tightly covered, man's jacket, no jewelry. Why? Because you didn't want your hair getting caught in machinery. So everybody wore headscarves tied this way. And this would lead into a trend for turbans. Turbans were one of the big headwear trends of the war years. And here is a very glamorous turban. So you can see how something that started as utility ended up as a glamour item. Some women covered their hair with hairnets like this. These were called snoods. Here are a couple of riveters with snoods, but of course snoods would also then become a big glamour fashion item. Let's talk about hats. Hats in the 40s became outrageous. Beautiful. Pretty, whimsical. Look at this one. It has nearly an entire bird on it. All kinds of different shapes. And everybody wore hats. Always. But for very different reasons to why they wore hats in the 30s. In the 30s, it was about being ladylike. It was about propriety. In the 40s, it was for fun. And everybody wore a hat. And I can prove it. Look at this picture. This is a graduating college class, and every girl has a hat. Do you notice anything else about this picture? This is the graduating class of LIM College in 1945, when we were still the Laboratory Institute of Merchandising, so these gals are your predecessors. You see, hats were counted as accessories. And accessories were off the ration, which explains why women went mad for hats. They went mad for accessories. And it also explains why accessories got so wild. Like these gloves. And these shoes. And look at this wonderful collection of bright colored bracelets. And this cherry necklace. By the way, cherry necklaces were very popular during World War II. All kinds of novelty items were very popular. And by the way, the material, this sort of plastic that was used, actually in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, for costume jewelry, was called Bakelite. Bakelite. It's very, very expensive now, but it was cheap then. It was costume jewelry, but now, Bakelite is very expensive. So can anyone guess why accessories weren't rationed? Come on, everything that makes up accessories could be used for the war effort. Anyone guess? Well, I'll tell you. Roosevelt decided not to ration female accessories. Why? For morale. He felt women needed something. We were doing such a good job in the forces, on the home front. By the way, that's the word that's used for America or Britain. The home front. We were doing such a good job, he decided not to ration accessories because he had to keep our morale up too. Designer of the decade. This lady, Claire McArdle. She's kind of incredible. She's given the credit of inventing American ready-to-wear, which I guess in a way she did, because she took utility clothing and did incredible things with it. She really sort of invented this sort of casual but stylish American look. She was credited with a bunch of stuff, actually. The first dress is called the popover dress. It was really the first kind of wrap dress. It's not Diane von Furstenberg, it was Claire McArdle who did it. And women loved it. It was easy to wear. She really understood what the American woman's life was like on the home front, worked with utility, and kind of invented American ready-to-wear. And think about it, this was the first time ever, really, that we couldn't look to Paris for fashion. Paris was occupied. Men. Well, what were most men wearing during this era? Uniform. And just going on Google for a second and typing in man photo booth 1940s, every image that came up showed a boy in a uniform. It's really incredible. I wonder if guys would step up today the way they did in World War II. However, civilian clothing was known as your civvies. These are your civvies, and you can see it was a very big look. Huge jackets, and very high-waisted pants. Ties were shorter, wider, and very colourful and fun, sometimes too much fun. And here it all comes together. Don't these guys look great? And if you would like to learn more about 1940s male attire, yep, head over to my very, very good friend, Professor Cockle, in his menswear class. Zoot suits. There was one particular item of clothing that didn't go down so well, the zoot suit. And here it is. This was worn primarily by Latin men in Los Angeles, and it caused a scandal. There is a zoot suiter, as he was known, with his girlfriend, who's also wearing an oversized zoot suit jacket. And the zoot suit caused riots. Look at this headline from 1943, Zoot War Called Near Anarchy. Basically, guys in uniform would hunt down and beat up zoot suiters. Why? They weren't in uniform. 2, they hadn't enlisted. 3, look at all the fabric a zoot suit uses. But really, it was just an excuse to have a conflict, racial conflict. It was really a racist series of attacks, but prompted or under the excuse of fashion. And here are some recent runway inspired by the zoot suit. The cultural hotspot of the 1940s was South America and Central America. Why? Because of the good neighbor policy. What was that? Well, at the beginning of the war, Central America and South America were undeclared. Roosevelt had to make sure that we got this region, this continent, on our side. We had to make sure they didn't go off and join the Axis. But of course they didn't. Without any hesitation, Central America and Latin America joined the Allies. And so South America and Central America were sold on the American public as being our good neighbors to the south. This was propaganda, because if we lost this war, and it looked for a very long time like we would, basically Mexico and South America were the only nations we had left to trade with and to travel to. So South America was really spun on the American public. Look at this. Meet Latin gaiety, old world charm in lovely, light-hearted Cuba. It wouldn't be so light-hearted once Castro came in and took over, but still. In movies, tons of good neighbor policy movies that really sold South America as being this incredibly glamorous, romantic hotspot. Down Argentine Way, Weekend in Havana. In music, too, songs like the coffee song, they've got an awful lot of coffee in Brazil. And movie stars like Carmen Miranda, who came from Brazil. She was a huge Hollywood star in the 40s and really was part of this whole good neighbor policy. And of course it would play out in fashion with these embroidered souvenir jackets, they were called, with Mexican embroidery. The Mexican peasant blouse. This was ubiquitous. Every woman in the 40s owned one of these. Sort of Inca, Aztec type of motifs. This is high fashion, very chic. And look at the print on this dress. Isn't it fantastic? All of those sombreros. Serape stripes, too. Traditional Mexican stripes here, featured on a wonderful 40s jumpsuit. Shoes. You could have a whole Mexican village in your heel if you wanted to. And of course, in non-rationed jewelry, look at this, it spells it out, Pan American brooch. And look at this little pin. And of course, a banana necklace. But keeping with this tropical, meet the midriff. The 1940s is when we first see the midriff. This is a very famous one. This is Lana Turner in the movie The Postman Always Rings Twice. Here is Lauren Bacall in a midriff. And look at this beautiful evening gown. Don't you love this? This is outrageous, but so elegant. And this is another very famous midriff, worn by our next style icon, Rita Hayworth, one of my personal favorites. And there she is. Rita Hayworth really had that ideal strong body, didn't she? She was a movie star, a dancer, a singer, and she is iconic. She was so extraordinarily beautiful. And this picture is particularly famous. She was also a pin-up. What GI wouldn't want a picture of Rita Hayworth in a negligee kneeling on a bed in his rucksack? And this picture has been redone a million times. Here it is with Amy Adams doing it. And here is a Rita Hayworth look-alike channeler on the cover of Love. See the movie Gilda. It is such an important fashion movie. And it was so popular in its day, and she was considered so sexy and so hot, because she really is, wait till you see this movie, that a picture of her, Gilda there, was taped to the atom bomb that we dropped on Hiroshima. Here's a great quote from Rita. I think all women have a certain elegance about them which is destroyed when they take off their clothes. Something to remember. And drop that bomb we did. In fact, we dropped 2 atomic bombs on Japan. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the war ended. Peace and victory. And I'm sure you all know this image, the kiss in Times Square on VJ Day, victory over Japan. VE Day had happened a few months earlier, victory in Europe, and against all odds, we won the war. And after World War II, the world again wanted to draw a line under absolutely everything that had gone before and to essentially start the 20th century anew. The post-war world would be marked by the concept of modernity and an obsession with anything and everything that was new. And it started in 1947 with a new look. See you next time for the second half of our amazing voyage through the 20th century. Sorry, the incredible 20th century. See you next time. Bye.